Okay, so why did the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans, called FOPO, in 2019 unanimously call for an independent commission to decide how to restructure the West Coast licensing system into an owner-operator system? Well, since the 1990s, West Coast fisheries policies have favored processors, investors, and foreign entities, which have increasingly gained control and ownership of fishing licenses and quotas, concentrating access into fewer and fewer large vessels, hands and large vessels. Processing companies have gained majority ownership and control in many fisheries, allowing them to export raw fish to Asia and the US for processing, where labor is cheaper. As a result, Canadian jobs have been radically reduced in fishing, fish processing, and throughout the value chain. And corporate and foreign ownership of fishing licenses and quotas has not been tracked by DFO in fishing license applications or transfers. So the actual so-called beneficial ownership of this Canadian resource is not even known by government. How did the West Coast evolve so far from its almost 100% owner-operator situation in the 1960s? At that time, in most households, in most rural coastal communities, um, most households had a commercial subsistence, a commercial fish boat, which was used for multiple purposes, such as hand logging, hauling freight, hunting, subsistence fisheries, collecting firewood, plants, berries, medicines, and processing and providing transportation for schools, healthcare, and shopping and attending social events. The neoliberal economic thinking, which eliminated many small boats, had no grasp of the important values that small fishing boats provided to rural coastal communities. DFO focused instead on conservation and the goal of economic efficiency, defined as maximizing the profits of fewer fishermen by reducing what is thought of as too many boats chasing too few fish. The 1969 Davis Plan and the 1996 Mifflin Plan radically reduced owner-operators, but did not reduce fishing effort. Neoliberal economists then focused instead on allocating a fixed amount or percentage quota of the total allowable catch of a specific species to an individual fisherman, the quota owner, who could then not have to race with other fishermen to take his or her allocation because the quota gave them a predetermined access to it. They maintained that if individual quotas were transferable via the market, they would end up in the hands of the most efficient fishermen, those who could operate at lowest cost, removing the need for government allocation of access privileges. However, nothing stopped individual transferable quotas from being separated from actual fishermen, transforming the permit or quota into a tradable commodity like stocks on a stock market, which could be sold or leased with no restrictions from government policy and no requirements to inform government of trades and beneficial ownership, that is, the party that ultimately benefits from the license or the ITQ attached to it. Thus, fishing licensing policy on the West Coast was allowing, number one, the collapse of the fisheries economy in coastal communities through the reduction of fishing and fish processing jobs held there and their associated infrastructure, such as gear and boat maintenance services. Number two, it was allowing the consolidation of ownership, control, and exorbitant rent extraction from fishermen by investors and corporations. And three, it was allowing the lack of socioeconomic information by government, the lack of social information to government, including licensed beneficial ownership and how it was affecting stated policy goals and limiting competitive markets. DFO started to respond to FOPO recommendations by requiring that a beneficial ownership declaration be a licensing condition. But when 20% of licensees did not comply in 2022, They did not lose their licenses, and they were not punished in any way, actually. DFO also formed a committee to consider how to implement FOPO recommendations, but later dissolved that committee. Even the industry working group that recommended a shared risks and benefits arrangement to keep small-scale fishermen from going broke and leaving the industry was ignored by DFO, which appears to be turning a blind eye to the FOPO recommendations and some much-needed reforms. However, earlier just this week, FOPO released its December 2023 report on foreign ownership and corporate concentration of fishing licenses and quotas, with 19 strong recommendations that push DFO very hard. The first recommendation is that DFO immediately respond to their 2019 recommendations, which they say DFO has completely failed to do. They also enhance these 2019 recommendations with further suggestions about how to achieve the goals of their earlier and current recommendations. And so the question we are left with is, what will it take for DFO to take action? And Jim McIsaac could answer questions as well as I, so please direct them to either one of us.
Thank you.